What is the most Karen thing a Karen has even done to you? Personally, my manager Karen sat me down for an hour after my shift had ended preaching to me why it was my fault I was physically assaulted by a customer. Tried to return a top to the store I worked at 6 months after it was purchased. When I said there is a time limit on change of mind returns, she knows, she shops there a lot. She tried to tell me that was against the law. When I correctly pointed out that the law referenced faulty items, she tried to tell me her fat butt not being able to fit into it was a fault of the garment. When I told her she could try her luck with corporate, she stormed out only to storm back in later to ask for my name to add to her complaint to the ombudsman. I gave it with a smile, 'cause I was freaking right, and moved on with my day. It's not too small, you're just too fat, Karen. Sorry the latest cabbage soup cleanse you read about on Instagram didn't work out the way you wanted it to, sweetie. I was sitting next to a lady on a plane, and she instigated some small talk before takeoff. When I told her I studied earth science, she proceeded to ask me if there was any real proof that plate tectonics existed, and asked what my Lutheran church thought about that. I'm not religious and there had been literally zero talk of religion at all in the conversation before that, haha. I was 16. Just got my first retail job at a big supermarket in England. I have my first shift and it goes well, and my new manager, Karen, tells me she'll text me my shifts. I get no texts but instead an abusive phone call telling me I'd missed my next shift. I get called in for a meeting and Karen tells me I'm a liar and lazy. She made me cry in my first ever job. Frick Karen. Dang. I feel bad for you. My sil Karen asked me not to put pictures of her children on Facebook. She said she was a very private person and just didn't want them on there. That's fine. If she had left it at that, I would have been okay with it. But then, she goes on to say, you know, because I put people in jail. She's not in law enforcement in any way, shape or form. She's a human resources manager. I can't wait to see the action-packed movie the story will be based on. Karen's children are abducted as payback for her condescending, no help whatsoever, human resources style, and she has to get them back. I wonder if Liam Neeson will play her? This summer, she took their jobs, they took her children. Liam Neeson is Karen. My mom's name is Karen. Guess it would be all those times she blamed me for the old man being a disgusting, man-child prick with daily meltdowns. Thanks Karen. That's what little kids need to hear. It's their fault daddy should be in therapy and on medication but instead does neither. Dang. That's awful. Not really Karen, more like entitled parent, but I see no difference. So if you're from Illinois, you know that softball baseball is huge there. Like everybody plays it, even if you're not athletic you've tried at least t-ball at some point in your life. My little sister's HU softball team made the championships in our in-house league. Essentially a league of like 5-9 teams that all played each other for a title at the end. My dad was the coach, and my sister's team, first place overall, and was playing the second place team in the championships. It was like the last week of June, so it was hot as heck outside. The other team they were playing had some buttholes for parents, like record-breaking buttholishness. Every time a call didn't go in their favor, correct or not, but in this case maybe like 3-ish calls the entire game were bad, which is not bad at all considering it was a 15-year kid umping the game. Every single time one of their players gets called out, boo. One pitch is called a strike, boo. My dad, at the time, was the president of the league, and often spotted runs and such to the other team because in his own words, they wouldn't shut the heck up. They were down by 10, so spotting them a run here and there wouldn't hurt. Long story short, at the end of the game he was booed off the field by the parents at a 8U softball game. 8-year-olds who are in like 2nd grade, Jesus people. Then after the game, the two teams were celebrating at Dairy Queen. Obviously not together. Then one of the moms from the other team comes up to me and my dad and says, you and your other butthole coaches cheated, and it was not a fair game. If I ever find out that you're working with children again, I'll call CPS and let them know what you're up to. People like you are what's wrong with America. Note, my father is black, so that last line was relatively offensive. When I worked at a grocery store, a woman come over and said there's water on the floor. I checked it out. Looked like someone had a case of water leaking. So it was leaving a trail of very small spots of water. I went to the back to get a mop. When I came back, literally less than 30 seconds later, she was laying on the floor next to a 3-inch circle of water. She was yelling about suing and me being lazy. She told the manager that I refused to clean the water because I deemed the small spots as insignificant. The manager believed her, even though I had a mop and wet floor sign in my possession. The manager said I was supposed to stand next to the spill until another employee walked by so no one would fall. I said but it took less than a minute to get the mop and the women already knew the spill was there. They fired me for arguing against a customer basically, because I wasn't giving up. I have a hard time dealing with dumb crap. Couldn't keep my mouth shut I guess. I hated that job anyway. The manager and customer were both Karens lol. I hate that. More than once a manager has sided against me despite the customer being so clearly in the wrong. At this point I just call a manager if I'm having trouble with a customer and feign stupidity. It's not worth arguing with a Karen. This random lady that lived in my neighborhood said I couldn't bike in front of her house without wearing a helmet because she was afraid of getting sued by my parents if I were to fall off my bike in front of her house or something along those lines. I was like 8. Told her the street wasn't her property and rode away. Didn't really look back for a reaction. To be honest, that sounds more like someone who's been the victim of too many Karens. We were about to board a plane and all the passengers were organized into 2 queues. The employees slowly allowed the queue my family and I were in first. This random woman in the other queue noticed she wasn't going anywhere and was obviously impatient. So she tried to pretty much pick a fight with my mum, complaining to her why she gets to go first and that apparently she has priority and a bunch of other nonsense that couldn't be further from my mum's fault. Used to work at Walgreens in the photo department and I was a huge stickler for not selling professionally done photos if they didn't have a release from the photographer. This one lady brought in a boudoir set that I'm certain nobody wanted to see, but they were clearly professional. I wouldn't sell them to her. Told her she could get a release from the photographer and come back. Immediately indignant. Exclaimed I'll email him right now. She did. Few minutes later, she makes a phone call. Walks 1 aisle away from me to take it. Now is yelling at the guy saying he screwed her over and why did you give me a CD with the pictures if I couldn't print them, and then my favorite line. No you're cheap, I was losing it in the photo department. Goes on for a couple more minutes, then she storms over to me again and just goes, gimme my pictures mom, you clearly don't own the rights to these. I'm not going to sell them to you, go get your manager. Sigh. I walk to the office and talk my manager. Tell her everything. We laugh, but ultimately my manager was a pushover most of the time. Not this time. She walks out with me and now we are both telling this lady off. She starts to accuse me of being a pervert who just wants to keep them for myself. Yeah, nah. But ultimately, the manager, just to get her out of the store, says that instead of them going in the bin with all of the other no sales to be counted in the morning and shredded, she'd shred them right then. Of course this is this lady's only win for the day, so she takes the deal. She stayed there while my manager shredded them. These freaking stories happened every goddamn day. I work at a casino now and I saw far more scum of the earth trying to frick over professionals there at the job at Walgreens than I ever see at the casino. And frick any of you who ask why did I care. Those people don't do photography for fun. It's their freaking job. If you want prints done, either pay them for them, or pay for the rights to the digitals, and you photographers. If someone does have your permission to do as many reprints as they like, freaking give them some kind of written or digital permission. That way the person who prints those photos can say they saw the slip, and are absolved of any responsibility brought about by reprinting. According to Walgreens policy, if the photographer found out the photos were reprinted, my store and I could each be responsible for damages to their income for having printed them. My very close friend died in a horrible car accident when we were in our late teens. We lived in a small town, so it made front page in the local newspaper with a big picture of her total car. My first day back I was working in the drive-thru. A woman practically shoves the newspaper in my face, going on and on about how sad and tragic this poor girl's death was, going into the details that I still can't believe were allowed to be printed about how she died. Just on and on. She didn't know my friend or anything. She was just so moved by how this poor beautiful soul died so young. I just closed the window, walked away and broke down. She actually complained at the next window that I wasn't more sympathetic to her. I now have a word for women like her. Grief vultures. They seek out these sad and horrible stories and make it about them and their feelings. It's become a personality trait I can't stand. It makes my skin crawl. I call them tragedy W. Cut and line in front of my mom and I with her equally Karen friend at an art museum. Whipped out their member cards and asked the lady at the desk a bunch of questions, delaying us further. Yes, she had the Karen style haircut. Once I told a Karen I didn't know where something was because I didn't work there and she said, well, you're just useless. Yikes. I was helping this lady at work who was super rude to me and another co-worker that was helping her too. She basically bitched that I was too short and that my co-worker was fat but didn't have enough boobs. She was making us try the clothing she wanted to purchase but it wouldn't fit her cause it was a size 4 and she was a plus size. We were short on staff so while my co-worker was helping her and another lady, not a Karen, approached me for help, I slowly disappeared and helped her instead. Later on she complained that I just left her hanging, which was true but not really since she eventually had 2 people helping her. Also, she didn't even buy a lot compared to the nice lady that I helped. I work in a dentist, booking appointments. A mum was bringing her autistic son to an appointment. I barely remember the phone call but she asked if there was parking, to which I said there is opposite but can get full quick. About 2 weeks later her son's appointment comes up. She doesn't turn up but 10 minutes later, calls to say she can't make the appointment, was promised parking but was no parking available, told her she wasn't promised parking and asked where she is. Turns out she drove past the clinic, couldn't find a driving spot, drove to the other side of the city, to park, to call to cancel. The phone call went on along the lines of, "You lied to me. How dare you do this to my autistic son? I want to make a complaint as you're discriminating." After a few more cusses, I apologized if she was offended, to which she goes, "That's not an apology. I want an apology." Never gave her one. "I want your manager's name. You need to go on a customer support course." I'm pretty chill so I never talk back or raise my voice, but she just went on and on and on. A little late but here it goes. I was working a back drive at a fast food joint years ago, and older Karen comes driving in to give her order. Now, this location doesn't have a speaker due to a neighborhood ordinance, so all the orders and drive-through are taken face to face. She orders a double cheeseburger without onions, and I ring it in, complete her order, and send her on her way. About 5 minutes after she's picked up her food she comes back through drive-through and says they put onions on my burger. I apologize. Print her up a duplicate receipt to confirm to her and myself that I rang it in without onions. I then tell her that if she goes up to the front window and tells the manager who's working up front that they'll replace the burger for free made correctly, but that I can't do anything about it back here. She does so and they give her a brand new burger and an apology. I thought that was the end of the situation, but boy was I wrong. Karen called the state government on me, by name, demanding I be fired. If I recall correctly, I was told that she called the Food Safety Department, the Chamber of Commerce and the Governor's office. The franchise owner called to say that it turned out that Karen is allergic to onions, and she straight up accused me of deliberately ringing her sandwich in wrong and trying to poison her, then printing up a false duplicate receipt of her order to make her look like a liar. Keep in mind that I read the receipt back to her and she confirmed it. I didn't get along with the manager who was working at the time, but even he was like, "That's complete bulls. It wasn't even his mistake, it was the kitchen's and we fixed it for her." The franchise owner was told by whichever branch of the state government called them that Karen had demanded that I be fired. I wasn't even written up, but I did stop wearing my name tag at work when I could get away with it. TLDR. Got the state government called on me by Karen because the kitchen messed up an order, which got replaced free of charge. Could have been fired for a mistake that wasn't even mine. When I worked at Harris Teeter, a small grocery store, I had a woman tell me that my nail extensions, which I had gotten for prom, were not sanitary and that I was unhealthy. I tried to explain, "No, I wash my hands. I keep them clean." but before I could get a word out she said I really don't care and wouldn't let me speak. She then went and complained to my manager because I was slow. The order before her was a $300 order, yet it took a bit. She also had 3 items and could have gone to self-checkout. I had another woman insult my hair and another expect me to open my line for her when I was having a system error on that checkout line. Needless to say I quit fairly quickly. Is this Karen? It felt like a Karen. LOL. I used to run a childcare site for after school care at a swanky Christian school. We also had a summer program. During the summer, we had a field trip to one of those giant arcade type places with a pizza buffet. All the parents sent baggies full of quarters for the kids to play with. One first grade girl opened up another kid's backpack and took her quarters out. Both of the girls approached me and the one said Stacy took my quarters out of my backpack. I said Stacy, did you take quarters out of her backpack? She nodded yes. I said okay, I'm going to need you not to touch anyone else's backpack again for me. Your mom sent lots of quarters and they're in your backpack. You'll all have plenty to play with. Well, the policy of the organization I work with says that if you discipline a kid about anything, or tell their parent about an incident, you have to write it down. I wrote like 100 of these a week. It was no big deal. They occasionally came in handy to have documented behavior to talk to parents about patterns and problem solving. Well, when I told her mom and gave her the form, she demanded that I change the verb stole to took. She was like, I will not sign a legal document saying my child stole 8 quarters. It has to say took. I'm like okay, so I change it. Then I get an email the next day formally requesting all copies of this form to be turned over to the parents and the document be struck from the record because she isn't confident that proper research was done and possibly her daughter never took anything to begin with. Okay, lady. So my company basically told me not to say anything and they'd contact her. She never said anything else about it again. They told me that they assured her that it was for our record keeping only and wouldn't follow her daughter in any legal sense. My grandparents live on a lake, and the first 20 feet from the lake is communal property. I was about 10 years old and feeding the geese corn on the lake across from my grandparents' house, and Karen walked halfway around the lake just to tell me that I wasn't allowed to encourage them to poop on her lawn and that I had to stop feeding them immediately. When I told her that my grandfather said I was allowed, she marched me up to his house, rang the doorbell, and only deflated when she realized my grandfather was the president of the whore and pee at her for grabbing his granddaughter. From that point on I made it a point to scatter corn on the 20 feet directly in front of her lawn. My next door neighbor, whose name is Karen, runs away from me and any of my family members when she sees us. Or if we both happen to pull into the parking lot at the same time, she will not get out of her car first and will wait for us to leave. We don't know why she's suddenly like this. Mom and her used to be close and then Karen slowly started to not accept my mom's invitations to hang out. We've even asked her daughter about it and she doesn't know why her mom is acting this way towards us. I'm guessing it's mental illness with extreme paranoia as a symptom. I had a Karen complain to me because she told us her husband had big feet in her house design brief, but we put a standard stair in her house. In tears. Hearing his heel doesn't fit on the stair still makes me chuckle. She asked to speak to the architect, then the boss, then demanded a free staircase. I think she actually got some money off, which was funny. Cut more holes in her daughter's Swiss cheese because her daughter wouldn't eat the sandwich because it didn't have enough holes. This was my first month of restaurant ownership and still the most Karen request 13 years later. In medical school, we had a Karen. She was not a very nice person. She was notorious for losing her temper on just about everyone and being an overall bully. One day, she picked me as a target. Apparently I was sitting in her seat. I asked her to point out to me where it was posted or embroidered on the seat that this was Karen's seat. I refused to budge. Prof. Entered lecture theater. Karen protested to Professor. Prof. Proceeded to give her a verbal beatdown on entitlement and how these types of people make horrible doctors. Karen felt wronged and left. The whole class applauded as she was leaving. She mostly kept to herself afterwards. I felt it was long overdue justice being served. Worked night shift and we weren't really supposed to leave for lunch. Since I was the only person with a car, my co-workers asked me to go get them lunch at an all-night place. I come back and Karen was standing in the parking lot. steaming. She follows me in and raises her voice. I just laugh and I go bring the food to our co-workers. In the morning email she writes a blurb about it. The general manager just laughs and tells her no one liked a tattletale. Run me off the freaking road because she can't make good judgment calls on when to turn left. Out of a school. Classic Karen haircut, oversized shades in her SUV. Honked at her but she did not even move her head an inch. I drive a big truck so there's no way she missed me. Calmly followed her, got identifying info and I'm gonna file a report. She waved herself in. Calm Fury 10/10. On my second week at my very first job, a Karen bought a discounted mini Christmas tree. She yelled at me for not having the box for the tree in the back. The trees didn't come in boxes, believe it or not. They came in pieces in large bags off the delivery truck. So she was mad I couldn't pull a box out of thin air. The back store, that magical place where we keep all the things Karen wants. Empty boxes, discontinued products, clothing in her size, even products we never had. Once Karen came into the restaurant I was working at and told me that it was rude to not speak English. I told her sorry, I was talking to the cook. She asked to see the owner so I called my mom to come out. Long story short, Karen got a free egg roll. Working for a hotel. The guy checked in with another agent, exceptionally early, but we'd call you as soon as a room was ready. It's probably 9 AM. Check-in officially isn't even till 4 PM. He comes back for his keys and starts to be to me about how it's ridiculous he had to wait this long for the call, blah blah blah. Instead of schooling him on the fact he got his super specific request almost 8 hours ahead of schedule, I told him I was sorry and legitimately meant it, and he looks me dead in the eyes and tells me yeah you are, and hobbles off with his keys. A friend of mine is named Karen. Although we're like 40 some years apart, she's probably my best friend. When I was homeless for a while, she let me stay at her house as long as I needed to. After living there for a couple of months, she always wanted to speak to the manager of pharmacists when a medication wasn't filled fast enough. Well, I suppose you could talk to the Surgeon General, but I'm not certain that pharmacists are quite in his wheelhouse. I used to manage a restaurant. I had a lady complain about an issue with a previous order and she wanted something replaced. She didn't have what she wanted to return. She had a receipt dated October of last year. She came in to complain about it in January of this year. She went on to say the manager was a tall white guy that told her that she can replace it. I was the only manager at that time. I'm black. So she threw a tantrum, saying how she was never coming back and was talking about complaining on Yelp. I'm glad I don't have to see her again. Male Karen story. I worked retail for a bit in the kitchen section of a department store. A middle-aged white guy comes in and goes up to the stand for most ridiculously overpriced kitchen equipment. A line run by a guy whose name sounds like Schmeston Schmumental, and demands a knockbox. A knockbox, for all you normal people out there, is a small box that matches your coffee machine that you can empty your used coffee grounds into. You then empty the box into the bin. I am not sure of the point of this, but he really wants one. My colleague says, very politely, "Oh, we don't sell those, but you can get them online." He loses his crap, calls her incompetent, yells how can it possibly be that this is a brand section and yet they don't stock every single item that brand has ever made. He wants one now. Why can't he get one now? This isn't what he expects from this store. Where is the manager of this terrible employee? A manger comes over and gently reiterates that he can totally get a knockbox, just online. Hey, they can help him do that right now if he wants, but it's no use. He is hopped up on Class A entitlement and will not be calmed. Where is he going to put his coffee grounds? In the bin? Like some peasant? No. He's never shopping here again and storms off. Finally, the manager turns round to the rest of us. "What a dong," she says. An old woman went to management because I sneezed. She said bless you and I didn't say thank you. I didn't hear her or I would have because that's an automatic response for me. My manager came up laughing his butt off over it. Worked at a restaurant. One day Karen called to complain that a bird crapped on her car while it was in our parking lot and she was inside eating. Asked what we were gonna do about it. My little sister is named Karen and her entire life has been a Karen thing. When she was 4 we were at Target and she was upset that we were waiting in line too long. So she asked to speak to the boss of it all. A year later we were Christmas shopping at JCPenney. I tried to grab her hand and she danced away from me, saying you smell poor and poor people can't touch me. When she was 3 we were play fighting and she genuinely got mad. She grabbed my glass of Coke from the end of the table, dumped it on my head and then threw the glasses my face. She had a bully in her 2nd grade room this year. Little girl was constantly making fun of her clothes and other stuff. Kid crap. At the end of the year little girl fell off the monkey bars and busted her arm. Karen came up, squatted down and said that's why we play nice with others. There's more but I've got to get ready for work ATM. Barge into my dorm room when I wasn't there. She was a friend of the renter and was looking for a dorm for her daughter. I had told her, the renter, I'll stay in the dorm for the next year and went to get some groceries or donate blood. IDK anymore. When I came back her youngest daughter was drinking my last soda bottle for the year and playing around with my collectibles and game designs. Luckily our renter had my back with saying that is completely normal for a student to leave their doors unlocked if they're away for 15-30 minutes and she couldn't just barge in a dorm room. Karen thought that she deserved to jump ahead of me in line at the grocery store because she had a very important meeting to get to. Unfortunately for Karen, I was fresh out of fricks to give that day. She waited her turn like the rest of us. Used to work at Tesco and she asked to see the manager. When I told her he wasn't there she just said fine, I'll just take my business elsewhere. It was Christmas Eve. I was working the last dash shift for people to get all their essentials. It's 9:30 p.m. 10 p.m. is close. Karen comes to my counter and lets rip that she can't find any cranberry sauce. I'm sorry but we haven't any sauce left. I reply. Why? How can you not have any cranberry sauce at Christmas? Because it's Christmas Eve and we've sold out, idiot. I think I posted this before in the fast food stories thread, but it works here too. When I worked at Subway, a Karen came in and ordered a foot-long meatball sub. Problem was we were currently in the middle of a crazy and unexpected rush, and didn't quite have enough meatballs left for a foot long. We were only short like 1 or 2 meatballs. I let her know this, and said I could put what was left on there and charge her for a 6-inch. At the time she was fine with this. About 15 minutes after I should have left, I was still dealing with the aftermath of the rush when this Karen comes back in. She starts complaining that her foot-long meatball sub didn't have enough meatballs on it. Here's the thing. She didn't have the receipt so I could show her that she was only charged for a 6-inch, and she had already eaten the sub. It's not like she came right back in and said this sub here in my hands doesn't have enough meatballs. It was like 30-45 minutes later and the sub was already eaten. After trying to explain all this to her, she's now screaming in my face. Admittedly I may have started yelling back at her at this point. Eventually she threatens to sue the store and leaves. At least there was a fun ending. The next day I get a call from the area manager who had heard from this Karen. At first I was a little worried, but then she goes, I reviewed the footage from the cameras. I think you handled it pretty well. If I were there I would have jumped the counter and decked her. Moved into my house. I have a Karen who is my mother-in-law and aptly named Karen. My wife and I being heartful idiots sold our home and had a bigger house built so they, Mill and Phil, had somewhere to go since retiring without a retirement. Oh, and I've also been told on more than one occasion that it's their house and he's the patriarch. We pay the mortgage, so who knew? Cut me off when I was trying to help her with her produce and stares at me for a few seconds with this weird degrading look. High school. Winter in Canada. The squad and I are going out to lunch and our one friend slips on some ice in a parking lot and lands on her butt. We all laugh about it. Even the girl that fell, Karen, who is just pulling out of the drive-thru, parks, gets out of her car, and yells at all of us about how that is not funny and we should be ashamed of ourselves for treating a friend that way. Her sudden passionate and unwarranted anger makes us laugh even harder, which makes her even angrier. Eventually we ignore her and go get burgers. Picture this. You're a teenager working in a grocery store in late hours closing up the meat department. Your job is to clean the place and occasionally help a customer with some of the pre-prepared meats and find what aisle has what. The time is now 8:30 p.m. The store is dead quiet, and you're wrapping up your cleaning work and shift, just making sure everything is shiny and chrome, and rinsing off the last sudsy dredges from off the butcher tables. You're content with the way the soapy surfaces appear to be nice and clean under what's left of the still soaking tables. Enter Karen. Stage left. Karen, hey, can I get a ribeye cut to about 3 inches thick? You, no, I'm sorry ma'am, we can't cut anything. The butchers leave at around 6 PM, but I'm happy to. Karen, what do you mean you can't cut meat? Aren't you a butcher? You, no ma'am, I'm the after hours clerk, but I can take an order for you for first thing tomorrow. Karen, this is an outrage. Are you open right now? And is this the meat department? You, internally dart, oh boy, here we go. Yes ma'am, the store is open, but the meat department closes at 6 o'clock except for the pre-prepared meats and orders. Karen, I drove from place an hour and a half away, and now you're telling me you won't cut meat, even though you're open? You, preemptively, I'm sorry ma'am, if you would like, I can call the store manager, but the department is covered in soap. There's nothing we can do tonight. Karen, yes, call him right now. I want to speak to your manager, of course. Enter store manager in a suit and tie. Stage right. Explanation of situation and general rudeness from Karen. Manager, we'll get that sorted for you right away. Your name. Please get the ribeye and take it to the back. You do so reluctantly. Manager with hairnet on stopping mid-stride at seeing the disassembled and soap-covered department. Manager walks back out to Karen, who is waiting triumphantly. Manager, I'm sorry ma'am, we can't cut this tonight, but I can take an order for you for first thing tomorrow. You, fassapum from out of sight. Cue, slap sound MP3. Manager and Karen argue unintelligibly as the stage darkens. End. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.